Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 3rd of June. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your morning hit of news and analysis from a European lens, live here on Euronews. Coming up, Iran has agreed to negotiate aspects of its nuclear programme that it had refused to do so just a month ago. That's according to the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, speaking before Congress. Global markets remain on edge, though, as Iran says it will suspend peace talks and move towards full closure of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important shipping routes. And all eyes on the European Commission today as it unveils plans to boost the production of advanced semiconductors within the EU, so-called chips. The bloc has long relied on foreign suppliers for some of the most critical technologies that we need for modern daily life. The so-called Tech Sovereignty Act aims to change this. But first, Hungary could lift its veto on the opening of Ukraine's EU accession talks in exchange for an agreement on minority right protections for the Hungarian community inside Ukraine. Such a move would mark a significant step forward in relations between the two neighbours, and it comes as Ukraine continues to face intense Russian drone attacks, with strikes this week killing over 17 people and injuring over 100. For more on this story, our correspondent Shandra Ziros joins us now in the studio. Good morning, Shandra. Just tell us what's the latest on this movement towards a deal.
Good morning. Yes, indeed, Péter Magyar was yesterday in Berlin. He met Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, and the topic of Ukraine's accession was very high on the agenda, and Magyar said that he's very optimistic. Now, let's remember that the previous Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, blocked Ukraine's accession for months and for years because he thought that this is a danger for Europe. And now Magyar is trying to get rid of all of the controversial issues that he inherited from Orbán. One of them is Ukraine's accession. Magyar's condition is that Ukraine agrees on the protection of the minority rights, education and culture. Here we are talking about an 11-point action plan proposed by Hungary. Magyar said that the talks are advancing, he's optimistic and he could meet Zelensky next week. Let's take a look at what he said.
So far, these negotiations are progressing very encouragingly. We hope that they can even be concluded at a technical level this week. And I can confirm here, in Berlin, in this wonderful, vibrant city, that I'm ready to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky sometime early next week, if we can actually agree on these basic human rights.
Ezekben az alapvető emberi jogokban.
Péter Magyar, and of course today he's moving on to Paris to speak with Emmanuel Macron. But tell us, Shandor, when can the EU start agreeing on starting Ukraine's membership talks?
Well, Euronews spoke to several EU diplomats and all of them were very optimistic. They are saying that before the next EU summit at the 18th of June, there could be an agreement and Hungary could lift its veto. This would mean that Ukraine could start its first negotiating cluster with the European Union, which is about fundamental rights. Now, there is also one reference about starting the negotiating chapter in the draft conclusions of this European summit, which is a clear signal that the EU is preparing. And let's not forget that, Ukraine's accession is very high on the agenda of Antonio Costa, the head of the European Council, and Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission. So everyone seems to be on the same side. And also, this could be a very big step also for Ukraine, because after years of waiting, they could actually start the negotiations with the EU.
So you're saying everyone could be on the same side. That's something that rarely happens at those EU summits. Shandra Ziros, thank you so much for that update. Now, trade and finance ministers from all across the globe are huddling in Paris today for the OECD's annual ministerial. For the view now from the Australian government on all the challenges facing the world today, we can cross now to Paris, where we're joined by the Australian Trade and Tourism Minister. That's Don Farrell, of course. Good morning, sir. Great to have you with us on Europe Today. You're very welcome.
Good to be talking with you, Maeve.
So look, you're in Paris today for these important talks. You seem to be edging closer and closer to Europe all the time. Is that because of the uncertainty of the US administration and the threats perhaps posed by China today?
Look, once we came to government 4 years ago, pretty much this month, we had decided that because of problems that we'd had in our trading relationship around the world, that we needed to diversify our trading relationships and not have all our eggs in the one basket, as they say. And so, over the last 4 years, we have developed new trading relationships. The United Kingdom, for instance, we've signed a free trade agreement with them. That's working really well, and our trade is up very, very significantly with the United Kingdom. With India, our trade's almost doubled with India since we reached a trade agreement. We reached an agreement with the UAE again. That's been very successful. And now, most recently, the hardest of them all was a free trade agreement with the Europeans. But we signed that a few weeks ago in Sydney.
You did indeed. It's always complicated, isn't it, when it comes to the European Union? But this all happens as well in a backdrop of potential prolonged instability in the Middle East that potentially could push the global economy closer to recession. Tell us what's your view here, especially bearing in mind that you're in Paris today at these talks, and how this war is impacting the Australian economy.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt, Maeve, that'll be a hot topic that we'll be discussing over the next few days. My job in particular, since this war began, was to ensure that Australia had enough fuel, whether it be petrol, diesel or airline fuel, and fertiliser for our crops. So I've been very focused on travelling around the world to ensure that we've got sufficient of all of those products. So I've been in Singapore, I've been in China, I've been in Japan, and of course now I'm here in Paris. We want to ensure that however long these troubles in the Middle East last, that we've got sufficient of all of those fuels to keep our industry going. It's very important for our farmers, very important for our miners.
Very similar talks taking place in Brussels, and other talks that took place here in Brussels just last Friday. Very urgent talks on how to deal with China. What would Australia's advice be here? How can Brussels learn from your example of dealing with Beijing?
Patience is a good first start with the Chinese. When I became the Trade Minister 4 years ago, we had $20 billion worth of trade impediments with China. Now, you've got to put that in perspective. China is our largest trading partner, and at the time, trade was worth about $330 billion, two-way trade between Australia and China. But we set about to stabilise our relationship. We'd had a very rocky relationship, the previous government, and to win back all of that trade. And it took us 3 years. We didn't get it fixed overnight, but by the end of our last term in government, we had resolved all of those trade impediments. And for most of the products that had been subject to those impediments, we were now actually selling more than before the impediments were imposed.
OK, so I'll pass that message on to EU leaders. They need some patience. Just finally, do you consider China your biggest military threat? And are you also focused on tech sovereignty like the European Union is doing today by presenting a master plan?
Well, we'd like to see peace in our region, Maeve. And when you look around the world, there's plenty of trouble spots around the world, whether it be the Middle East or in Europe. One of the things that we've been very focused on is, as a middle power in the region, is ensuring that we project our policies of a peaceful region. That's been very good for Australia in recent months, particularly with the troubles around the rest of the world. We've been able to continue pretty much uninterrupted our trade relationships, and that's the way we'd like to keep it.
OK, Minister Don Farrell, thank you so much for joining us this morning live here on Euronews on Europe Today. Now, moving on. In the meantime, the European Union is preparing its 21st package of sanctions against Russia. But its chief engineer, David O'Sullivan, has already touted he does not expect the bloc to go harder on Russian oil due to the ongoing war in the Middle East, driving up crude. China, on the other hand, is always in his line of sight. For more, we're joined by our defence correspondent, Anja Skujins, who actually sat down with the EU's sanction envoy to discuss the package in detail. Good morning. Tell us, what should we look out for in this next bundle of measures?
Good morning, Maeve. So officially, unfortunately, everything is under wraps for now. But what I can say is that EU heads of state want the bloc to put the pedal to the metal and get ready with this 21st sanctions package because it's needed now. This was underscored by a drone incursion in Romania last week, demonstrating Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine, as well as the impact and the spillover effects this is occurring across the bloc. Now, all eyes will also be on the new Hungarian Prime Minister, Peter Magyar, who takes a less friendly stance towards the Kremlin compared to his predecessor, Viktor Orban. Many are hoping to see that this sanctions package will have more bite to it. A major point of contention will be whether the EU moves forward with its maritime service ban on those Russian oil tankers. This previously flopped due to a veto by Malta and Greece. Also, we'll be looking out for whether the EU continues to go harder on Chinese companies helping Russia circumvent EU sanctions. As you rightly pointed out, I sat down with the EU's sanction envoy, David O'Sullivan, to talk to him about this suite of measures. And I started by asking him first about how that crackdown was faring, particularly as some of these Chinese companies produce the components found in Russian drones.
We recently listed some in a previous package, some Chinese banks who then agreed to discontinue funding Russian activities. So we have been active in taking action against Chinese companies, but I won't hide from you that China remains a very big problem for the circumvention of our sanctions.
How big?
Well, it's one of the biggest sources of circumvention, both in terms of what we call backfilling. This means simply selling Chinese versions of goods which we previously sold as Europeans, so things like household goods and so forth, which is of course perfectly legitimate, but also unfortunately as a platform for the re-export from China of Western branded goods and EU branded goods. So this is still a problem. We raise it regularly at the highest level with the Chinese authorities, but you know their answer, which is to say that they don't feel they're doing anything wrong, so we still have to take unilateral action against Chinese companies and financial institutions.
But they've also retaliated following the 20th package of sanctions. China responded by banning at least 7 European defence companies from receiving certain dual-use products. Should we expect more reprisals from Beijing?
Yeah, I think the Chinese play hardball, as the Americans say, and I think we have to face up to that if we want to take action, they will also take equal action. But I think it is very important nonetheless that we continue to be able to send a strong message that we are vigilant about efforts to circumvent our sanctions and that where we see the evidence, we will take action.
On the 20th package of sanctions, there was also the proposal from the Commission for the full ban on maritime services for Russian tankers as part of the country's shadow fleet. The understanding was that there should be approval first at the G7. Now, those leaders will meet later this month in Evian. Do you expect a breakthrough?
I think events in the Gulf have clearly changed the calculus about anything to do with energy. For the moment, what all Western economies are struggling with is access to energy at reasonable prices. The price has gone up, and there is scarcity of supply, also in the area, for example, of refined products, so diesel, jet fuel, and so forth. So I think at this point there is no appetite to take additional measures which might aggravate that situation. But I think the fundamental point, Angie, is that, our sanctions on the energy side are having a huge impact on Russia. Russia's revenue has gone down. The public finances are in great difficulty. They're in deficit. So I think, notwithstanding the fact that we may not move forward in the short term on the maritime services ban, everything that we have done, whether it's the oil price cap, whether it's the actions against the shadow fleet, all of this has contributed to seriously undermining Russia's revenue from hydrocarbon exports. And this was one of our key objectives, and it is working.
Our Anja Skujins there with David O'Sullivan. But moving on now to the Middle East. In signs that peace talks have made very little political progress, the US and Iran have launched fresh strikes. Despite claims from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, that a deal was within reach, the reality on the ground looks different. For more Euronews' Stefan Kobe joins me now here in the studio. Good morning, Stefan.
Good morning, Maeve.
It's getting very hard to follow all these mixed messages. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Maeve. Donald Trump likes to call himself the master of the deal. But when it comes to a ceasefire with Iran, it's really hard to tell what exactly he is negotiating for. One day, Trump says peace is within reach. The next day, he sounds pessimistic. Then he suggests the breakthrough could happen any moment. A few hours later, he appears to lower expectations again. Now, for America's allies, financial markets, and certainly Iran, deciphering Donald Trump's latest position has become a full-time job. Now, Trump would argue that's exactly the point. Unpredictability has always been a part of his brand. Keep everyone guessing and you keep the upper hand. But there is, of course, another way of looking at it. Now, critics say the shifting messages reveal a deeper problem, and it's not strategic ambiguity, but strategic uncertainty. They argue that the White House has no plan and is trying to find a solution sort of on the fly. So every new Trump statement is now scrutinized for clues. Is he signaling a breakthrough, preparing the ground for a compromise, or is he just changing course again? So that's the challenge with Trump's diplomacy. The line between negotiating tactic and confusion is sometimes not visible, Maeve.
And certainly keeping you very busy. And of course, we can read more of your analysis on euronews.com. Stefan Kobe, thanks
Absolutely.
for that. And due to this, of course, oil prices have been incredibly volatile again this week because of the uncertainty around supplies getting through Hormuz and prolonged hold-ups. For more on the impact on financial markets and energy prices, we're joined now by Osama Rizvi. He's an international economic and energy analyst. So good morning, Osama. Welcome to Europe Today. So first question, are markets reacting rationally, do you think, to the risks right now? Or do you think investors are underestimating how serious this could become?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I think it's a bit of both. When you see the markets, there seems to be a continuum on which the reactions can be perched upon. For instance, the oil markets. Look at the oil markets. A few weeks ago, the difference between the physical markets and the paper markets was huge. The spread was somewhere around $36 to $38. But now, as we speak today, that spread seems to be shrinking. But is the conditions or the circumstances better now? Are the circumstances better now? Not at all. So which means that markets are sort of divided, confused. They're in a haze as to what will happen next, and this confusion, uncertainty, is what is fueling this dual behavior, I would say. But moving forward, one thing is very important to understand, that fundamentally speaking, from oil markets to the financial markets, the chances of both turning ugly or things getting worse are unfortunately more than them getting better before.
And you said the markets are feeling confused. What about consumers? How concerned should we be about fuel prices rising further at the pumps?
Well, consumers have been very clear about what is going around, and also being very clear in terms of their future confidence regarding the global economy. For instance, economic confidence in Europe is down. When you look at the US, it's at the US Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index is down to multi-years low. You look at the input cost, especially in Europe, it has increased to a 4-year high. Similarly, you look at across the consumer centers, I think it's showing confusion.
It's all very gloomy, isn't it, Osama Rizvi? But thank you so much for joining us this morning and bringing us all your analysis. And now, as you heard earlier, EU leaders are still scratching their heads about how to prepare for increasing drone incidents along the EU borders. For more on what's at stake, here's our Jakub Janis.
If you think this is how war sounds, your reporter has bad news for you. Things have changed, and you should be more wary of this sound. After last week's Russian drone crash into Romanian apartment block, Moscow offered no apologies. Instead, Russia's Deputy Security Council chairman, Dmitry Medvedev, issued a chilling threat. He warned that because European governments supply weapons to Kiev, the citizens of EU states will not be able to sleep peacefully. So how can Europeans defend themselves from drones? The EU has an action plan on drone security, but a leaked document from last week reveals how member states actually plan to put it into practice, focusing on 3 key areas. Number 1 is stricter identification. The bloc wants tighter registration rules so authorities can instantly tell a harmless civilian drone from a hostile threat. And second is smarter detection. Member states want to use advanced sensors and artificial intelligence to spot incoming drones near critical infrastructure. And lastly, we have intelligence sharing. Brussels wants to act as a central hub for coordinating data across the continent. But here we have a little problem. National governments insist this sharing must remain strictly voluntary to protect classified information and avoid duplicating NATO's efforts. So let's go back to our drone case in Romania. The Ministry of Defense acknowledged it could not shoot down the drone due to its proximity to people's homes, and authorities had just 4 minutes to act. And as long as the drone security remains primary and national competence, European governments will operate in silos, and citizens will see the consequences. The Baltic region was rattled by at least 6 suspected incursions in May alone, with one incident even forcing Lithuanian president to take shelter underground. So yes, the EU is trying to work together on securing its skies, but with threats from Russia, it must build a truly unified defense before it's too late.
And that brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for your company. As always, you can always reach out at europetoday@euronews.com. But in the meantime, stay tuned to us here at Euronews and see you soon.